Welcome to Jim Sells the Suncoast, your go-to podcast for all things real estate on Florida's beautiful Suncoast. I'm your host, Jim, your friendly neighborhood real estate agent, and each week we dive into the vibrant world of buying and selling homes while embracing the laid-back lifestyle that makes Florida such a paradise. In our episodes, we'll explore the latest developments shaping our communities and spotlight the incredible companies and industries that play a vital role in real estate, from movers to mortgage brokers, title agents to insurance pros. Whether you're a first-time buyer, a seasoned seller, or simply dreaming of that perfect beachside bungalow, we've got insights, tips, and plenty of local flavor to guide you. So grab your sunscreen and get ready to soak up knowledge, laughs, and a little sunshine as we navigate the Suncoast together. Let's make your real estate dreams a reality, one episode at a time. Good morning and welcome to Jim Sells the Suncoast. Today I am privileged to have Brett Holler with me from Express Title. He has been in this area, instrumental in the area. Started off in real estate down into Miami about 14 years ago. Has moved over to title, so he's able to give perspective on both. Brett, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
I am doing great.
We definitely are. And I definitely want to take one moment to just say it's been a rough couple months for everyone, but definitely the last few weeks as well. So I know I'm blessed and fortunate to be doing okay. I talked to you prior. I know you're doing okay, but just a moment for everyone that's still going through a lot of the chaoticness and craziness. It's something, but I will say, as someone born and raised in Florida, is a very resilient place, and people, no matter what, will never stop wanting to move here.
Yeah.
As devastating as it is, we always come back and we come back stronger.
You bring up a good point there. When I bought my first house, we made the offer and we're like, we'll close in 30 days or 45 days. What is going to take so long? And I know a lot of that is the title process we're going to go through and really talk about it. So the general rule, what role does a title company play in home buying and selling?
So basically, if I were to sum up in one sentence what we do, I would say at title company, we're like that Elmer's glue that holds the deal together. We're the middleman.
Right.
Let's start from the beginning in the sense of you are a realtor that has a new contract. You are representing a buyer and your customer is directing the title. Or perhaps you're a listing agent and you're selling a home and the seller is directing the title. No matter what, you always need a closing agent to close the property for you. Florida is a title state in the sense of you're not required to work with an attorney. However, working with an attorney can give you that added layer of value and protection. So starting from the beginning, the title company is involved right away from the get-go. The second there's a contract and it's fully executed, that contract will automatically be sent by whichever realtor in the transaction customer is essentially paying for title.
Right.
So we call that the directing customer. That realtor would then send us that new file, let us know, hey, I'm so-and-so with XYZ company. We have a new contract. My customer is directing title or paying for title, which of course generally means that they're paying for the other closing costs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, we would then go ahead and open the file, which means the process of all the things that we'll do, which we'll get into, for the file to be successfully closed, starting with usually the clock is ticking off that initial deposit. So the first thing a realtor will usually do is advise their customer, we're going under contract and we've identified we're going to put down however much that amount is.
Right.
Sometimes it's $3,000, sometimes it's $100,000. Usually the deposit amount is correlated to the amount of the property price.
Right.
So what we would do is would send wire instruction through a safe and secure portal. Our company uses one called Qualia.
Mm-hmm.
And basically whoever is sending in the money will receive those instructions from us. And once we receive the wire, the initial deposit, we'll send out a letter and essentially we're now in business.
Right.
We have money. We have a hard contract that's signed by everyone. And now the process can really begin. So before anything is even done, we've already gone through all those steps. And I would probably argue the most important step for a title company which is very important for realtors and lenders alike to know, is when they send us a contract or send any title company a contract, the sooner we have everyone's information, the better. Because to your point on why did it take 30 days or 45 days to flip, there's times where as the title company, we might be waiting 2 days for someone to send us contact information. So that could be a 2-day delay right there.
Right.
If we get a contract, and most detailed realtors will send it to us this way, they'll send us a contract, and then in that email, everyone's contact information. Pull involved in that transaction.
Recap it real quick, like the clearinghouse for all the information and all the processes going back and forth through the different groups, whether it's the buyer and the seller. You probably most of the time have a mortgage lender, maybe not if they're paying cash. You've got the insurance broker, and those are the main players. So we start with a contract. If I'm representing the buyer, we make our offer, they accept it. My first call is to you. Hey, this is in play now. Here's all the players. Here's their address or contact and names. Here's what we're using. And then you're going to be the one to coordinate to make sure everybody's hitting their targets, their dates, their responsibilities, and then to follow up on what's going on.
Exactly. So, for example, there are so many different things that could come up initially when the transaction is open. If there's probate involved, if there's any other tag involved to that transaction, the sooner we have that information, the better, because the title company might need to reach out for something like a death certificate or any document that we would need to attach to that transaction to make sure everything is being done safe and securely and fully.
Everything's vetted.
Exactly.
All right. So we go through, we've got this process started. You're handling, we do the escrow deposit. What are the next? You talked a little bit about it, but really you're going to go through and start verifying that all the information is true and correct. And there's no encumbrance or lien that's going to get in the way.
Exactly. So basically, once, let's say there is a lender involved, once you have the deposit and that initial, we start working immediately, but we really dive even deeper once that initial inspection period is over, because then we know, okay, these people are moving through with the process. We've all seen those deals where there's so much work done ahead of time, and then 3 days later, they decided not to move ahead because whatever, back on the inspection. So we do order title right away. What I mean is we send the file to our underwriter and request an order for title. An order for title means they know that we have a sale or a purchase going on, and we'll be transferring the ownership for one person or one party to another party. The first thing that's done is the title search, as well as the municipal lien search. So in the title search, they're looking for any clouds, liens, encumbrances, anything on the actual property from an ownership standpoint.
You just mean something that's not right.
Real estate is a very black and white world. Very few things should ever be gray, because there's either one way or another. It's not this or kind of that. So the municipal search, similar to the title search, is the search that's done through whatever municipality the property is in. So if they're looking for Sarasota County, if it's a place like, let's say, Northport, you have searches being done for Sarasota County as well as the city of Northport for things like permits and whatnot. So those are the first two things that we're ordering, and we're waiting to get back. That way, once a search is done, we know we can go ahead and tell that customer, hey, we received the lien search back, the title search back. There's no issues. There's nothing out of the ordinary. We can go ahead and proceed with the purchase. And during that time, if this is, let's say, a finance purchase, the lender is also working in tandem with us and keeping us abreast of everything that's going on, whether it's their initial approval, whether approved, but have to get through this list of 12 conditions or whatever the case being. Or to your point, maybe it's cash and there is no lender involved. But when the lender is involved, this could really be the time that we're working in collaboration to now get the deal done as quickly as possible. We know that there's nothing on the property from a title aspect or from a local aspect as far as permits, liens, anything like that, that would delay the buyer from moving forward.
And it's got to be resolved beforehand, before you can actually close, which is going to take additional time and possibly change parameters through that. Okay. Once all that's done, now we're pushing a closing. And when we get down to that closing, that final thing, you're there to make sure everybody is contributing their part. Meaning the mortgage, they brought the money. The insurance brought the binder. The people showed up with whatever they have to final close out. You've got all the signatures. You put it all together, and then it's done.
Exactly. So to your point, being that glue that holds everything together, as the title company, all these updates that come up throughout the transaction, whether it's the inspection came back clean and they're ready to proceed, or the buyers are actually approved and the file came back from underwriting from the lender and it's not clear to close, but they're approved, then we know that.
Or barring something unusual, we're going to be.
So during this whole time, really what we're focusing on is getting all that information, compiling it together and adding it all to the file. So everything from the start of our transaction to the end, we use, like I said before, a software called Qualia. Everything is safe and secure. It's protecting all the customers' personal private information. It's very easy for everyone to access. And that's where all of the documents will go. So whether it's a title commitment from the underwriter coming back and saying, properties has streaked and clear title, and we're going to go ahead and issue a policy at the closing.
Right.
So then they will issue what's called a title commitment. And that's basically like a lender saying, we're going to give you the loan. That's like the title company saying, we're going to go ahead and insure the property.
We've checked everything. It's all good.
Exactly.
So what are some of the common issues during a title search? What's the common things you might find?
You're going to see it like Florida. People from all over the country and of all backgrounds and ages love to move here for the sunshine. It's like something they all have in common. They're all wanting to get out of the cold. So you end up with a lot of people here that are selling homes that are either passed down from generation to another, or the owner had multiple children. So you see a lot of issues when it comes to prior ownership, as far as things like probate issues and not necessarily having everything done as clean and crystal clear as it should have been. And then I would argue another thing that we see here too often is fraud.
Right.
So it's very important for everyone. Should be careful in a transaction. And we can get into that a little bit also, but it's that we see a lot of fraud. For example, we'll have someone claiming to be a seller. We find out they're not really the owner of the property. We've had that happen a number of times. And I would say another huge thing, which is not always a deal maker or breaker, it just needs to get rectified before the closing, is permits and liens.
Right.
So many people, the windows they put in 10 years ago to replace their old ones, they had a neighbor do it. They didn't get a permit.
Right.
Is it illegal? Yes.
Yeah.
And it needs to be rectified because the new owner wants to make sure that what they're buying is safe and secure. So sometimes these things involve closing out a permit or opening up a permit, having an item inspected and closing it out then.
Right.
So I would say those are a few things that are very common that would come back. What's great is that it happens so early in the transaction. It's like a health issue. You'd rather find out as soon as possible so that you can do something about it. And if the property is not something that the customer is willing to move forward on, again, that would be a great time for them. Transaction, if the issues were too large to rectify.
Okay.
Something like closing out a permit on a carport, for example, the worst thing that could happen would be they would tell you, hey, you got to remove the carport.
Right.
Maybe there was a screen cage put on the lanai and it wasn't done permitted, and they might make you take that off. Those would be examples of something that you could have again in the future, but at least what you're buying is safe and secure. And you ultimately want that title policy signed, sealed, and delivered to everyone, because at the end of the day, if there were to be another issue from a previous owner or from a previous lifetime, especially in an area like this where there's some very old properties, it's your safeguard.
So how do you determine the insurability of property title, and what kind of insurances are available?
So when it comes to title insurance, you have two main policies. You have the owner's policy to protect you from any clouds or encumbrances on your title. And then there's also a lender's policy. If you are financing your property, regardless of what type of loan, whether it's FHA or conventional, you need to have a lender's policy.
Sure.
It's basically providing the lender who's loaning the money to the buyer to obtain the house that safeguard and that assurity and comfort that the buyer is also receiving.
Right.
The buyer has that paper to tell them this is what you have to protect you in case of an emergency. The lender also has that.
They want to know they're not going to be on the hook for some money down the road.
Exactly. So it protects everyone. And then on a buyer side, one thing is, our home is supposed to be in Florida, and it's supposed to be right now with every one thing going on. As a buyer, you want to make sure you're purchasing a very good homeowner's policy. And if you're financing the property, you'll have to provide a homeowner's policy because it will protect you financially if, God forbid, something does happen to your home. Of course, it's very wise that the lender would require that too, because if their money is on the hook for your property for 15, 20, 30 years, they want to make sure, hey, if a storm waves through their neighborhood and they have all this damage, was strong enough to cover what we need for it to be brought back to the condition it was when we loaned them back.
Sure, that everything's legitimate and documented and ready to go when you go to sell it.
Exactly. So that's your general homeowner's insurance. But then, as we know, there's additional forms of homeowner's insurance that we're seeing now become more and more common. With all the storms going around, one of the most important insurances you can have insurance. We live in an area where we have part of our counties in barrier islands. There's very little protection around them. If you live in any of those islands and your home is financed, you have a very hefty flood policy because the lender is going to require it.
Right.
Whatever policy they have or don't have, of course, that's up to them. We have flood zones in Florida, which go all the way down to X, and it's based on the elevation of how high your property is in terms of how many feet high it is from sea level. The farther you go inland from those barrier islands, your need for flood insurance traditionally has been less and less. For example, you have a lot of realtors that will say, and lenders that will say things like, oh, the house doesn't need flood insurance. It's not in a flood zone. It's a misnomer. We hear that a lot of times from because all of Florida really is a flood zone.
Yep.
It's just that the risk of your property flooding much lower, being more inland or being so far away from sea or high above. It might not be a requirement. Yeah. Exactly. I know for sure, just on a personal level, after all these storms, I'm not in a flood zone. But when I found out the cost for flood insurance, because I'm not in a flood zone, it's so minimal. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and add that policy on my renewal because there's just no reason not to. I'd rather spend the money on something else. It's a scary thing to think about. So I would say that those are the foremost, important policies.
What is the typical cost associated with the title insurance, and how are they calculated?
So we have a table that we follow, and it goes from the property price being $100 all the way up to anywhere like $20 million.
Right.
And the amount of the policy is directly correlated to the property price. So the less the property price, the less the policy. Right. I just had a closing a couple weeks ago for a customer on a vacant parcel of land in Northport. I want to say the policy was $160 or something like that.
Right.
That means that for a $20,000 purchase, now for the life of ownership of that property, for less than $200, plus whatever cost they had to close, if there's any issue that ever occurred at any time on title, they'll be protected.
So I was going to say, what then does somebody need to bring? What kind of documentation or paperwork would I, as a buyer, bring to start that title insurance process?
So generally speaking, from us, we require actually very little. The contract is, of course, the most important thing. Once we have a contract, really what we need from everyone is their contact information.
Right.
If the property is being purchased from customers that are financing, all of that really all those documents, let's say, from things like bank statements to a physical identification, whether it's your driver's license or passport or multiple IDs, all of that stuff generally goes first to the lender.
Right.
We don't see any of that until the day of the closing.
Okay.
So on the day of the closing, that's when we would go ahead and make copies of the customer's identification. Whoever is signing is who they say that they, in fact, are. We don't necessarily ask for a whole lot of personal information from these people, other than we get a buyer's input sheet and a seller's input sheet at the start of the transaction. And that goes on when we're waiting on the deposit and we're inputting the contract on our end with all the terms and everything into our system.
Right.
And that's basically where we would get that information. Any information that we didn't already get in that initial email from, let's say, the realtor or whoever is sending us the file, that's where they would go ahead and fill that out.
Right.
Usually it's mostly basic information.
Okay.
They just want to make sure the contact information matches what you give them and all of that. But like I said, it's just verifying they are who they say they are. The underwriter is doing all of that. The lender is doing all of that. We will find out if something is not cohesive throughout the transaction.
So generally speaking, for you as a title, you need the contract and then verification of identity. Really.
Exactly.
The mortgage company will take all their information. The insurance company will get all their information.
Really, it depends on the circumstances.
Okay.
So, for example, if the buyer's very communicative and they're just going back and forth with their lender on everything that they need, we usually just get updated. There's some buyers that are not as available or sellers that are not as available. And then what will happen is whatever vendor it is that we're dealing with, maybe it's the lender, maybe it's the insurance company. A lot of times we'll hear from them and say, hey, have you been able to reach the buyers or have you been able to reach the sellers? The closing's coming up in 10 days and we're just wanting to make sure everyone's on the same page. So it's very common that the title company would come in to reach out to everyone. Title seems to be who's reached out to when there's any issue.
Probably you've got that relationship with each of the people involved, so it makes it easy to go one stop.
Exactly. To your point, if a customer is freaking out about something on a Sunday morning and they really need to get in touch with the attorney or they really need me to get an answer for them on a question, I can get all that done for them. And that's what's very important. If they need me to reach out to another one of the vendors involved in the transaction and I have a close relationship with them and I can get them to answer the call after hours, again, that's where the value is brought in. And it's just, to your point, making sure that we're keeping everyone on the same page and keeping everyone moving along as smooth as possible.
So here's a question. In the area, we have a lot of new construction going on. Is there any real fundamental difference with new construction versus buying an existing home?
There is. So when it comes to new construction, a lot of the local and even regional or national builders, because there's all types here. And as you see, we have communities with 24 new homes. We have communities with 450 new homes and everything in between. When you look at larger builders like Lennar, D.R. Horton, Taylor Morrison, those companies all own their own title company.
Okay.
So for example, if you as a realtor are bringing your customers to one of those developments, the first thing they're going to be offered is the right to work with their own title company and their own lender. Of course, when you have things like incentives at play, there might be incentives for them to go ahead and work with those people. Now, on the flip side, that doesn't mean that's what's in the customer's best interest.
Right.
Sometimes free closing costs don't always mean a better experience. So therefore, some developers will require you to use their closing company, but a lot do not. So that's another misconception, is that just because you're buying pre-construction means you have to work with every one of their vendors. That's where I would say it never hurts to ask the question.
Right.
So I know, for example, if we get a new development contract from someone, regardless of the community, I know that we're going to make sure that the attorneys are reviewing everything and making sure that purchasing in this community is in the customer's best interest. The verbiage on their contract is okay because, again, a lot of these developer contracts, they're not the standard Florida Farvar contract.
Right.
A lot of them are working with their own purchase agreements. 99% of the things you're going to have to go ahead and agree with because it's their community.
And there's
But
not
you're not
necessarily
always-
anything wrong with that. Just be aware of what you're getting into.
That's
Right.
my whole point.
Be aware of what
I
you're
always
paying or
tell
not paying.
people
Yeah.
it's about the options and making sure whatever's best for you.
Right.
It's never because one is better than the other. It's never be afraid to ask a question because with all that types of inventory, you have a lot of new inventory now competing with old inventory. And as a realtor, you also just want to make sure you're helping your customer, not, make sure that they're happy with their decision.
Right.
So that starts from picking, of course, the right property.
How do they handle that as a claim that wasn't permitted? What do we do?
So came back from previous ownership as, oh my God, this never came up, or
Right,
which by the way can happen because people are human.
Yeah.
I would say the first step is call your closing company. So if you use the title company, call them. If you use an attorney, call him, call her. It's important to get in touch with them first, if you're able to.
Right.
If not, you look at your policy and you call that underwriter company. You call the title insurance company that provided the policy to you and you just get on the phone with them and someone will help you because that's what they're there for.
Right. Okay.
None of this is new to them. And what sounds really scary to a homeowner sometimes might really be something that's not the end of the world.
Right. But they
So
just
the
need to go
first
the
thing you
steps.
want to, I would say, either call your closing agent to let them call for you, or if they're not available, just go ahead and call the title insurance company and get that conversation started and see what the next steps look like.
So what advice would you give for buyers and sellers to have a smooth title transfer?
I would argue that the most important thing for buyers and sellers alike is organization as well as good communication. Buying or selling a home for the duration of that transaction, which it could be 14 days, it could be 60 days, it could be a longer closing because the buyers can't close on their new home until they close on the previous home,
Right.
or whatever the case may be. The sellers can't move out until their new home is ready, but the buyer has have to close by a certain date for their loan, their interest rate, the loan, whatever the case being.
Organization.
Okay.
Know your dates, know your time frames, know when things.
So I would argue that organization would be the most important thing for everyone involved in the transaction to have, because when you deal with the transaction, you're dealing with time. Everything is due by a certain date. The contract will stipulate that the inspection period is over by a certain date. The money initial deposit is due by a certain date. If there's a second deposit, that second deposit's got to be due by a certain date. If there's a loan, the financing contingency ends on a certain date. The organization starts from the beginning and it's for everyone involved. For example, the realtor, I would say they should be providing their customer with a timeline of when these things are due.
Right.
On the lender side, I would hope that generally they have a team of people helping them. Usually there's not just the lender. The lender might have a processor. They have their underwriting team. Everyone having all their information correct, and then getting everyone everything they need as quickly and timely as possible. These are things that make a transaction go smoother. So another example would be if a lender says to a buyer, listen, we need 4 months of your bank statement. You're a first-time home buyer. We need a little bit more information.
Right.
If you take 3 days to get those bank statements back to the lender, that's now 3 more days before they can send it to underwriting, which it could take another 24, 48 hours, depending how busy underwriting is, to come back and say, okay, yes, got that. So the more organized everyone can stay and the faster they can get everyone the information that they need, it's possible to close a lot quicker. I know when I bought my first home as a first-time home buyer, I took all that information to heart and I was able to close with a first-time home buyer loan in 24 days. The longer people wait, the longer things take.
Sure.
And when it comes to transaction, time is always on your side.
Yeah, modern technology can help with that.
Percent. It's so easy for you to log into your bank app and just save your statements as a PDF and email them. You could probably do it in 5 minutes. So I would say that a transaction can move as quickly and smoothly as everyone participating in it allows for. The only other thing I really want to emphasize is that make sure whoever you're working with for your closings is someone that you feel very comfortable with and a company that you can really trust, but as well a company that's always there for you. Because like I mentioned before, real estate is a business that's 7 days a week and it doesn't discriminate against holidays. Sometimes a customer wants to put an offer in on a holiday weekend, whatever these things be. Make sure you're working with a company that makes themselves available for you and makes you as important to them as your customers are to you.
Awesome. Brett, thank you so much. I appreciate you
Thank
being
you
here.
so much. Likewise. See you soon.
And that wraps up another sunny episode of Jim Sells the Suncoast. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the ins and outs of buying and selling homes here in our beautiful slice of Florida. I hope you found valuable insights and a little bit of inspiration to help you on your real estate adventure. Remember, whether you're looking to buy, sell, or simply soak up the Suncoast lifestyle, I'm here to guide you every step of the way. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so that we can keep shining bright together. Until next time, keep dreaming big and let's turn those dreams into a reality, one home at a time.